Welcome back to Refit and Sail. My name's George and I am back from cruising now. It's back to the real world and I'm back in my natural habitat. I'm on a Contessa 32 in the boatyard. So this is the first of a few winter projects I've got. This is going to be quite a big project, this one, as I undertake a fairly big refit. The owner's asked me to do quite a few jobs. I've been through the boat and suggested a few extra bits and bobs that he might want along the way. Let's start with doing a little tour around the boat and you can see what I'm up against. So here's the boat as it's been delivered to me. She's pretty dirty and the hull is fairly faded, as you can see. Below the waterline, it's got copper coat. It's had new through holes at some point because these originally came with Blake's, but this has got more modern ball valves and skin fittings there. Looking back up the hull, you can see it's really grimy. I think that's the original gel coat and I'm hoping that's going to polish up. Running down the other side, it's the same kind of story. Really dull, faded gel coat, a few scratches and dings along the way. Copper coat again. Go into the back of the boat. It's got a massive anode. I'm not quite sure why it's got one that big. It's the sort of thing I'd see on a commercial fishing vessel, not on a Contessa 32, but there we go. Big fixed 3-bladed prop. You can see it's got a bit of blistering in the rudder there, so there's definitely some osmosis going on there. One of the first things I picked up is the blistering on the main hull as well, so you can see there's quite a few blisters and the light just picks them up if I come in close. There you go. So it's got blistering like that over a large area of the central part of the hull, and I'm not sure if the camera's picking it up. I've been over the boat with a moisture meter and everything is pretty high. I have opened up one or two of the smaller ones just to see how far it goes. It's not deep into the laminate, but it's certainly through the gel coat. It's not just under the copper coat. I have seen before now blisters just under the copper coat, but this seems to go a little bit deeper, so I think it is proper osmosis. The other thing that's slightly unusual about this boat is someone's added a metal bar to the back end of the keel there. I'm not quite sure why that is. Perhaps it was protection if the boat grounded a lot, but we might be removing that. There's the view from a little bit further away, and she's looking a little bit sad, but nothing is unrecoverable. It's got a slightly oversized and large pulpit up there, which is slightly bent. There's the old B&G log spinner. Amazingly, it still seems to work, but that's going to be going in the bin soon. Up in the cockpit here, the most obvious thing that badly needs doing is the cockpit seating. So these were originally teak-faced plywood pads that were kind of moulded into the boat when it was built, but they are absolutely rotten and lifting and badly needed replacing. Got the original main traveller there, the IYE traveller. It still works. I'm not sure if we're going to be replacing that or not. Original B&G instruments, that would have been a very expensive electronic setup there when the boat was new. It's got no clutches, so we'll be putting clutches on, we'll be putting deck organisers on, and there's no deck ring, so there'll be a deck ring on deck at some point. Not entirely sure what we're doing about the winches yet, but those halyard winches are going to be replaced, I'm sure. Spinnaker winches may also be replaced just because they are a little bit undersized, and the primary winches have been replaced at some point with self-tailors, although they are still Lumar 40s, which are adequate but a little bit on the small side. The tiller here has unfortunately succumbed to old age. If you look down there, it's all kind of cracked and broken. These often do split. The holly can rot out if water gets in there, and if I press down on that, you can see the whole thing is kind of flexing, and it would not take very much for me to break that. I'm not going to break it just for now because I need that as a pattern. I'm not sure if I'm going to make one, or I may have a spare repairable one in the workshop, so something that is up for discussion. The taff rail is in one piece, but looking pretty old. The tow rails are in multiple pieces and kind of falling apart. Yeah, so I think we're going to go for new tow rails, new taff rails when we do the cockpit. If we're doing that, we may as well replace the handrails as well. Handrails aren't in bad condition. They're missing a few teak plugs and a little bit worn in places, but I think we'll be going for new handrails. Looking aft from the bow, got the original main hatch there, which is very, very crazed, so that'll be due for replacement. It's had a middle hatch from the factory as well, which was an option at the time, and that's kind of had it, so I think we'll be in for new hatches. And then the main sliding hatch, again, I think that has been replaced. That isn't an original hatch, but it is looking pretty nasty, so again, that one is going to go in the bin, and we'll get a new one made to go on there. Lots of other odds and sods to do on deck as well. So the cap shroud U-bolts, which are there, I'll show you those down below in a minute, but they are going to need replacing as a matter of some urgency. The lower U-bolts, which are here and a little bit further up over there, again, they are looking very, very original, and after more than 40 years I think it's time that they got retired, just in case there's some crevice corrosion going on in there. They're also a slightly unusual design in that they are very tall and look a little bit bent, so I think it's going to be wise to chuck them in the bin. The windows, again, look very, very original, and the ones at the front are quite corroded, particularly inside. All the anodizing on the aluminium's kind of had it, so I think we'll be ordering up a new set of windows to fit those on the boat as well, to make sure she stays leak free. So all the slightly later Contessa 32s that were built have a gas locker just where that bilge pump is, in the back corner of the cockpit, but this is an early one. And on the early ones they had a slightly more Heath Robinson arrangement, or sometimes even had the gas bottle inside, which is a big no-no these days. This has had a retrofitted kind of gas locker thing in the cockpit here. You have to access it from inside the locker, which in itself isn't the end of the world, but I don't believe for a second that this gas locker is even remotely gas tight, so we're going to have a think about that and possibly try and retrofit a gas locker in the back here. I haven't decided whether I'm going to make a plywood epoxy box or just make a glass fibre box over a mould and stick that in there, but that's certainly what I think needs to happen just to keep the boat safe. Come inside the boat now, and that's us looking aft. We've got the galley over there. It's got a very, very old cooker which needs to go in the bin, and I'm not sure yet what we're going to do with the work surfaces or what sort of tidying up we're going to do in the galley. It's up for discussion with the owner, who I'm going to meet up with soon. It might be just a quick kind of freshen up of the galley with a new cooker, a new sink and possibly new worktops, but we will see. There's the chart table on the opposite side. It has had a new electrical panel at some point, but we're going to do a complete rewire, so new batteries, all new wiring, new switch panels and everything, along with all the new electronics that are going to go in. What's nice about this boat is, whilst everything is old, the woodwork is actually in really good condition. This is not a boat that has been abused and raced and beaten to death. Everything is kind of as it should be. It's just old. So I talked about the cap shroud U-bolts needing replaced. They are just up there. I will give you a close-up in a minute. They are definitely going to need doing. These ones are leaking. You can see the rust staining on them, but there was a known issue with these boats in the early days. They used a bar which goes through this knee. The legs of the U-bolt go through that bar, but unfortunately that bar was originally round and the nuts would sit against the round sides of that bar, and because of the point loading, the nuts would crack. So if you have a Contessa and you still have that round bar, then at the very, very least take it off and have a flat machined on that bar. But ideally, after all this time, you ought to be looking at replacing the U-bolts. Under the carpet here there is an old teak face plywood wooden floor, and under the floor is a GRP water tank. So one of the projects which I've been asked to do is to replace the water tank, so that means the floor needs to come up. So we'll get rid of that grotty piece of carpet which probably stinks and stick that in the skip. And there we are, looking forward all the way up to the forward cabin. Up in the forward cabin, it's probably not the nicest place to be, although I have seen worse. The headlining's kind of falling down. There's some bonding onto that bulkhead up there which has come loose. Coming aft, there is the heads. So this being an early boat, it doesn't have a GRP moulding for the heads which the later boats have. There's a kind of a vanity unit, that's a pull-out sink, and the Lavac toilet. Opposite, we have the hanging locker. And inside the hanging locker, I can get to up there. You can see some nuts coming through. That is the forward, starboard, lower shroud U-bolt. There's no backing pad on that. Again, on the early boats, they didn't put very big backing pads, or didn't put any backing pads on, and that sometimes caused a bit of flex in the deck. So that's another thing to be fixed. The good thing about this boat, I was quite pleased to see, is it's got a fairly decent engine installation. So whilst there isn't any sound deadening in there, that engine looks to be in pretty good nick. It's a Yanmar 2GM20. I had one of those in a Contessa 32 that I used to own, and it's a fantastic little motor, a little bit on the agricultural and basic side, but it chugs away quite happily all day and all night long. There you go, quick boat tour. This is the project I'm going to be working on for the next few months. She's actually a pretty good boat for the money that the owner paid for her. She is, I think, a pretty good buy, because while she is very tired and she does need quite a bit of love and time and money put into her, she isn't a boat that has been really abused in any way that I can see. I go around and normally check the places where I know secondary bonding fails and bits and pieces break or go wrong, and on this boat it's all pretty much sound, so it just needs a really good tidy up and needs a bit of love. I'm going to start by cleaning the hull sides, because I want to know if that gel coat is going to polish up and look quite decent, or whether we need to put a repaint onto the jobs list. I'm fairly hopeful that all that chalkiness and all that dirt and grime will come off, and she'll look pretty decent. So join me on my next episode for a bit of cleaning and polishing. Thanks for watching. See you next time.